Welcome back to Luke's Properties YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to talk about the 5 mistakes to avoid in rent to rent. Let's get into it. Okay, so number 1 is overestimating property potential. I see this happen all the time. When someone's very keen and eager to get their first rent to rent property, they often disregard doing their due diligence. They don't do their numbers properly. They end up trying to force a deal over the line. Then once they have the keys and they start to market the property, they realise that it's not that straightforward to find high-paying, premium professional tenants to come and stay in the property, because the market is competitive, right? And if you're going to charge a high price, then you have to add value, you have to improve the property, and it has to be worth the price that you're charging. You can't just make up a price in your head and hope that tenants are going to pay that. When tenants are looking for accommodation, they look at the whole market. They're on spare room, they're on open rent, they're on Gumtree. They're trying to find the best deal. They're not just going to jump at your property because it's newly advertised. It has to be priced fairly. You have to create fair value. And I see this happen all the time. When people are too eager, they try and rush their first deal across the line. They haven't done their due diligence. They've overestimated the property's potential. And because of this, they end up wasting time doing a rent-to-rent deal where they might make £200 or £300 a month max. In some cases, they may even break even because they haven't done their due diligence properly and they haven't properly estimated the property potential. So rather than trying to wing it and hoping that you're going to make £600, £700, £800, £900 per month in profit, before you push that deal through, really do your numbers, do your due diligence, and make sure that the property is actually profitable and it's going to make you at least £600 per month in profit. If you can't see that £600 a month in profit clearly, then go and find another property, because you could manage an HMO for around 15 to 20% of the rent collected and make around £300 to £400 just from managing the property alone, from offering a commission-based management service, where rather than guaranteeing the rent, you collect the rent for the landlord, take out your percentage commission as the management company, and then pay the landlord the remainder. That's a lot easier than guaranteeing the rent and potentially only making a couple £100 or breaking even or even losing money. So make sure you do your due diligence and make sure you don't overestimate the potential earning power of the property. The second mistake that you should never make is using the wrong contracts. I get people messaging me all the time saying, Luke, I've seen a property that I want to do rent to rent with. I haven't told the landlord what my plan is. I'm going to rent the property as an individual tenant on an AST contract, and then I'm going to re-rent the property out for a premium. Can I do this? And my answer is always the same. No, you can't do this. This is illegal. Rent to rent is a business. It's a proper business, and you have to approach it as a business. You can't rent a property as an individual and then re-rent the property out as an individual person, because that's the definition of illegal subletting. You need to be transparent with the landlord and you need to approach them as a company, as a professional business would. There's so many people who want to get started in rent to rent who don't understand the rules and regulations. They may have watched 1 or 2 YouTube videos and all of a sudden they think they're an expert. So in order for you to separate yourself from those jokers, you have to act a bit differently. You have to present yourself professionally and approach the landlord as a business. So stop trying to skip steps. You have to set yourself up as a company. You have to get the relevant insurances and you have to get the landlord's permission to sublet. They need to know what you're doing and they need to agree to it. And this takes practice, this takes work. This takes studying the theory, and then you have to actually apply the theory in real time and do the actual work. There's no shortcuts to this game. So make sure you're always using the correct contracts. You can't use an AST contract. You have to use either a commercial lease agreement, a company let agreement, or a management agreement. Those are the only 3 contracts that you should be using. Anything else is illegal and is not best practice. So don't make the mistake of using the wrong contracts, as it will come back round to bite you in the future. The third mistake to make is neglecting tenant demographics. Now this is a big one. I've heard stories about people doing this quite often. I think it's because of all the social media posts that people see surrounding Airbnb and serviced accommodation. The common misconception is people think that every property can work well as an Airbnb, as a serviced accommodation property. When I say Airbnb and serviced accommodation property, I mean a property that you furnish and then rent out by the night, kind of like a hotel, for a nightly rate. Now yes, some properties work very well like this, but some properties don't. It's quite a niche thing. It doesn't work for every property. Some properties work better than others. So again, if you've done your numbers based on the fact that you're going to be able to rent the property out for £150 per night for 21 nights out of the month, and that's the only way you can make money, then you might be leaving yourself slightly exposed, because service accommodation is seasonal, and there's some months where it's really busy and you will make that money, but then there's other months where it's not so busy. And if your only option is to rent it out as an Airbnb, then how are you going to make any money in those quiet months? Yes, you should make more money in the busy months that can cover those quieter months, but still, wouldn't you rather take on a property that works as an HMO, so you can rent it out to a group, or you can rent it out by the room, and you can rent it as an Airbnb? It's best to have both options. So don't just take a property on for the sake of it because you think it can make money on Airbnb. Really do your numbers, do your due diligence, look on AirDNA, check the occupancy rates in those areas, try and speak to other operators in those areas and find out how busy their properties are and how well they're doing. Find out if they're making any money, if it's a good season, a good area for Airbnb. Again, this is due diligence. This is the work that most people don't want to do, and then they end up getting themselves into this situation where they've got a property but they're not making any money because they didn't do all of their due diligence and they neglected the tenant demographic. The fourth mistake I see people making is underestimating the running costs. Now, I've been guilty of this in the past when I've taken on my first or second rent-to-rent property 7 years ago. In my mind, I just presumed that running costs, so gas and electric, it would cost around £300. Because I've always lived in a flat in London and it's quite small, it doesn't cost loads to run. So I've always presumed that properties are only going to cost around £300 a month to run in terms of energy, gas, electric, etc. But when you do rent to rent, the chances are you're not going to be paying for just the energy, you're going to pay for the council tax, the water, the Wi-Fi, and all these costs can add up. So going back to when I first started, I used to think it would only cost around £300 to cover the running costs per month. But once I got that first property, I rented it out, and then I looked at the numbers after a few months, I realised that it was costing me closer to £500 to £600 a month to run these properties. Luckily for me, I had found tenants who were going to pay me a premium, so I still had quite a lot of room there. So even though it was costing me more, I had tenants that were paying me significantly more than what I was paying the landlord. So I had enough room to absorb that additional cost. But most people don't have that room to absorb that cost because they've rushed into it and they've underestimated the running costs. Also, you want to work on reducing the running costs as you go. So you need to install systems. You should install a thermostat that you can control from your phone. You should set house rules for tenants so when they go out, they keep the windows closed and they try and keep the heat in the house. You should encourage tenants to not leave the lights on when they're not in certain rooms. All these little things eat up your profit. And just because you're keen doesn't mean you shouldn't do your numbers and you shouldn't do your due diligence. So make sure you don't underestimate your running costs. Nowadays, I budget around £100 per person per month for running costs. So for example, if I'm paying £1,500 a month in rent for a 6-bedroom HMO, then I'm going to budget for a further £600 that's going to go on running costs. So really, that HMO is not only costing me £1,500 a month, it's going to cost me around £2,100 a month. And yes, in the summer, it may cost you a little bit less, but it's better that you do your numbers on the side of caution than it is to be over optimistic and then you end up in this situation where you've underestimated the running costs and you're not making anywhere near as much profit as you hoped. So make sure you understand how much it's going to cost to run, and then when you find tenants, make sure you agree a price where they're paying significantly more than it's costing you to run the entire property, not just the guaranteed rent that you're paying the landlord. You need to put £500 to £600 on top of that. And then depending on how much profit you want to make, you need to charge your tenants relative to how much it's costing you. The fifth mistake I see people making is having poor landlord relationships. Now, this is something I had to learn the hard way. In the early days, I would take on properties without having a relationship with the landlord because I'd take them on through a letting agent and the letting agent would deal with the landlord. And sometimes this would create problems. So if there was a maintenance issue at the property, I would message the estate agent to get it fixed. They would then message the landlord. And because the landlord lived abroad in Dubai, there would always be this delay of like 1 to 2 weeks. And in that time, the tenants are moaning to me every day about the maintenance issues. And because I don't own the property and it's the estate agent's responsibility to manage the property because that's what they're getting paid to do, I can't just go and fix these things myself. I have to wait for the estate agent to speak to the landlord, then for the landlord to give the estate agent a green light, and then the estate agent will organise the relevant contractor or tradesman to come and fix the issue. But in that 2 to 3 week period, I'm charging tenants a premium price and they're not getting a premium service, because something as small as one of the toilets not working can create uproar in the household. And the only person that's going to have to deal with all of that stress is going to be you as the rent-to-rent operator. So if you are working with an estate agent, then make sure they understand that you need to be able to contact them if something goes wrong. You need to understand their system for when things do go wrong. How quickly can they send out a tradesman? Do they have a good system in place that gets issues fixed quickly? Because if they do, then you can work with them. But if it's going to take 2 to 3 weeks to get something fixed, then this could put a huge strain and stress on your business. If you're working directly with a landlord, then when you're negotiating the deal, make sure they understand that you need to be able to contact them. Because yes, you are guaranteeing the rent and you are trying to give them a passive income and a hassle-free solution to landlording. But things always go wrong with property. The nature of property is people use property and then there's wear and tear. And when things do go wrong, you need to have clear terms and conditions that define exactly who is responsible for what. Landlords have an obligation when they rent a property to make sure it's in working condition. And if at any point throughout your tenancy, the property isn't in working condition, then that obligation falls under the landlord's obligations. So I'm talking about the boiler, I'm talking about the structure of the building, I'm talking about the windows. These are all responsibilities of the landlord. You as the operator are there to do minor maintenance, yes, but your job isn't to pay your own money towards someone else's property. That's a landlord obligation. Anything expensive is going to be a landlord obligation as they own the property, not you. However, you need clear lines of communication between you and the landlord to make sure this is very clear and to ensure that when things do go wrong, which they will, they can be fixed quickly, therefore keeping your tenants happy, therefore allowing you to run your business correctly and smoothly. Efficiency and communication is the key here. And the final bonus point is overspending on refurb and furnishings. Now, I see this one happen a lot too. People get very excited, they get the keys to their first rent-to-rent property, and then all of a sudden they're off to IKEA and they're spending £4,000 to £5,000 on furnishing someone else's house, buying all the bells and whistles when they don't actually own the property. Or they start going looking at new bathrooms or new kitchens, and that isn't the game here. Remember, the game is to improve the perceived value on a budget. You don't own the property, so it doesn't make any sense for you to be pouring in thousands and thousands of pounds into someone else's asset. Yes, you want the place to look better, you want to improve the perceived value, but the bulk of your work needs to be cosmetic. So painting, decorating, furniture and staging. You shouldn't be putting in a new bathroom, you shouldn't be putting in a whole new kitchen. These are landlord obligations, not yours. Maybe you can come up with a compromise between yourself and the landlord. Maybe you can encourage them to put a new bathroom or a new kitchen in, providing you're guaranteeing the rent over 1 to 5 years. Landlords will feel a lot more obligated to do that if they know they've got a guaranteed income coming in over a long period of time. I know this speaking from experience because I've taken on old tired HMOs that do need new kitchens and new bathrooms. And I've negotiated with landlords that if I guarantee them the rent over the next 5 years, that they will make those improvements once they've got some guaranteed rent coming in from our company. So everything's always negotiable, but don't leave yourself exposed by overspending on someone else's property. Remember, the game is to spend as little as possible to get the maximum uplift and improve the perceived value. So you need to be creative. Rather than spending thousands and thousands, set yourself a limit. Try and only spend around £2,000 to £2,500 on furniture and soft furnishings. When I first started, I got all of my furniture from the British Heart Foundation, which is a charity shop that kept my costs down, and because I was targeting contractors, they were more than happy with that type of furniture. If I was targeting corporate tenants and corporate guests, then maybe that furniture wouldn't have sufficed. But because I was targeting contractors, they don't need the property to be a hotel standard. They just need the property to be a home away from home. And as long as they've got the basics, they'll be happy. So don't overspend on refurbs or furnishings. So those are the 5 mistakes to avoid in rent to rent. Just to summarize, we've got number 1, overestimating property potential. Number 2, using the wrong contracts. Number 3, neglecting tenant demographics. Number 4, underestimating running costs. Number 5, poor landlord relationships. And the bonus number 6 is overspending on refurbs and furnishings. If you want to get started in rent to rent, but you feel like you need some support, maybe you need a mentor, then in the video description below, I'm going to put a link where you can book a call in with me directly. And on that call, I can help point you in the right direction and make a plan for you going forward. If you feel like that would benefit you, then click the link and book a call. It's free, so why wouldn't you? If you want to watch another video where I break down exactly how to start your rent to rent business step by step, then watch this video next. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.